The light in my high-rise apartment was soft, the kind of amber glow that only comes from success and peace. I sat at my marble island, sipping tea, when my phone buzzed with a notification from a private hospital 300 miles away. Medical bill for patient, Arthur Hayes, paid in full by anonymous donor. Almost instantly, a flurry of frantic text messages from Morgana and Tristan hit my screen. They were terrified, desperate, and drowning in the depths of their own making. Juniper, if you can see this, please call us. Dad is dying. We have no money left. We know you're out there somewhere. Please, just help. I looked at the messages for a long moment. Then, I did what I had practiced for 5 years. I hit delete. I didn't feel a surge of anger, nor did I feel the hollow ache of sadness. I felt nothing. I had paid the debt not because I loved the man who ignored me, but because I wanted to make sure I owed them absolutely nothing, not even a grudge. I was a ghost in their lives, a shadow they had tried to step on for 20 years. And now, I was finally the only one standing in the light. Growing up in the Hayes household was like living in a theater where I was the only one without a script. My father, Arthur, and my mother, Lydia, were obsessed with the bookends of our family. Morgana, the eldest, was their pride, the beautiful, high-achieving daughter who was destined for greatness. Tristan, the youngest, was their joy, the golden boy who could do no wrong, no matter how many windows he broke or how many classes he failed. And then there was me, Juniper, the middle child, the easy one, the one who was expected to be the glue, while the rest of them were the fire. My childhood wasn't filled with bruises or screams. It was filled with something much colder: indifference. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I had saved my pocket money for months to buy a small cake, hoping we could have a family dinner. But that morning, Morgana announced she had been invited to a prestigious equestrian camp, and the house erupted in celebration. My parents spent the evening packing her bags and calculating the costs of the tuition. My birthday wasn't forgotten in the way people think. It was simply postponed indefinitely. Just adjust, Juniper, my mother had said, her hand dismissively waving toward me as she hugged Morgana. We'll do something for you next week. This is a big moment for your sister. Next week never came. That became the theme of my life. My achievements were quiet footnotes in their grand stories. I won the regional debate championship, and they celebrated Tristan's mediocre soccer goal. I got a scholarship to a top-tier university, but they told me I couldn't go because they needed the money for Tristan's private tutors and Morgana's debutante ball. You're so resilient, Juniper, my father would say, patting my shoulder without actually looking me in the eye. You don't need the extra help like they do. You're the strong one. They used my strength as an excuse to neglect me. They turned my independence into a weapon against me. By the time I was 22, I wasn't a daughter. I was a live-in housekeeper and a secondary bank account. I worked 2 jobs to pay for the house repairs while Morgana traveled across Europe, finding herself, and Tristan failed out of his second college. Whenever I tried to speak up, whenever I tried to say that I was tired or that I had dreams of my own, the room would turn cold. Don't be selfish, Juniper, they would say in unison. We are a family. We sacrifice for each other. But as I looked around the dinner table, I realized the only one doing the sacrificing was me. The red flag started appearing when the sacrifices became demands on my very soul. I had met a man named Silas during my few hours of freedom at the local library. He was kind, ambitious, and he saw me not as a middle sister, but as a woman. When he asked me to move to the city with him so we could start our lives, I thought I finally had an exit. But when I told my parents, the reaction was swift and brutal. My mother suddenly developed mysterious heart palpitations, and my father claimed he couldn't manage the household accounts without me. How could you leave us now? Morgana cried over the phone from a spa in Tuscany. Tristan is in trouble again, and Mom is sick. You're the only one who keeps this family together. Are you really that cold? They guilt-tripped me into staying. I broke up with Silas, watching the only man who ever truly loved me walk out of my life, because I couldn't bear the thought of my family collapsing without me. The true darkness set in a year later. The weight of being the family's emotional and financial sponge finally broke me. I slipped into a deep, terrifying depression. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, when the very air felt like lead in my lungs. I didn't want attention. I wanted help. I wanted my mother to sit by my bed the way she did for Morgana's migraines. I wanted my father to ask me if I was okay. Instead, they treated my illness as an inconvenience. Honestly, Juniper, the house is a mess, Lydia said, standing in my doorway with her arms crossed. We all have bad days, but this mood of yours is ruining the atmosphere. Tristan has a big interview tomorrow, and your sad face is depressing everyone. You're just doing this for attention, because Morgana is getting married. That was the discovery. The moment the veil was torn away, and I saw the Hayes family for what they truly were, a group of parasites who had mistaken my kindness for a bottomless well. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. I was a utility, like the electricity or the water. When I was broken, I wasn't a person to be healed. I was an appliance to be fixed or discarded. I lay in the dark that night, listening to their laughter from the living room, the clinking of glasses celebrating Morgana's engagement, the sound of my father promising Tristan a new car for an interview he hadn't even gone to yet. I realized that if I died in that bed, they wouldn't mourn me. They would just complain about who was going to do the laundry. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even confront them. I knew that any emotion I showed would just be fed back into their narrative of me being difficult or dramatic. I waited until the house was silent, until the golden children and the negligent parents were deep in their comfortable sleep. I got up, packed one small suitcase with my essentials, and took the $3,000 I had hidden in a hollowed-out book, money I had painstakingly saved by skipping meals and walking to work. I didn't leave a long, tearful letter. I took a single piece of notebook paper and wrote 10 words. You told me to adjust. I finally adjusted to being alone. I walked out of that house at 3 a.m. I didn't look back at the white picket fence or the garden I had spent hundreds of hours weeding. I caught a bus to the furthest city I could afford, changed my phone number, and deleted every social media account I had. I became a ghost. For the first few months, the guilt was a physical weight. I kept expecting the world to end because I wasn't there to adjust things for them. But the world didn't end. In fact, for me, it finally began. The aftermath of my departure wasn't an explosion. It was a slow, agonizing realization for the Hayes family that the heart of their home had stopped beating. For me, however, it was a rebirth. I arrived in a city where no one knew my name. No one knew I was the reliable middle child. And most importantly, no one expected me to sacrifice my dinner so someone else could have a second helping. I took a job as an overnight clerk at a massive logistics firm. The work was grueling, and the hours were lonely. But for the first time in 24 years, the silence belonged to me. I wasn't listening for my mother's fake heart palpitations or Tristan's demands for money. I was listening to the sound of my own ambition. I poured every ounce of the resilience my father used to praise into my career. In the corporate world, being the person who can adjust and solve problems is a superpower. While my colleagues complained about long hours, I thrived. I had been trained by the best emotional vampires in the world to handle high-stress situations with a calm face. Within 2 years, I wasn't just a clerk, I was managing an entire department. I realized that the strength my parents had exploited to keep me trapped was actually the engine that would drive my success. I didn't need their permission to be great. I just needed to be away from their gravity. While I was rising, the Hayes family was sinking into the quicksand of their own entitlement. Without me there to pay the utility bills or manage the household repairs, the cracks began to show. Morgana's marriage, built on a foundation of vanity and my father's dwindling savings, collapsed when her husband realized she had no intention of ever working or contributing. She moved back into the family home, bringing her expensive tastes and her constant drama, only to find that the bank was closed. Tristan, the golden boy who was always just one step away from a big break, finally ran out of steps. He got involved in a fraudulent investment scheme, thinking he could shortcut his way to wealth. When the legal fees started mounting, there was no Juniper to sell her car or take out a loan to save him. The guilt they felt wasn't because they missed me, it was because they missed what I did for them. I heard through a distant contact that my mother had spent months telling everyone that I had abandoned them in their time of need. She played the victim until the day she realized that no one was coming to fix the roof or fill the fridge. The community, which had once seen the Hayes family as a pillar of the neighborhood, began to see the rot. The grass grew long, the paint peeled, and the siblings' constant bickering became the town's latest gossip. They were the architects of their own downfall, but in their twisted minds, It was still my fault for finally choosing myself. When the news reached me about my father's kidney failure, I sat in my office overlooking the city skyline. I was no longer the girl in the faded jeans and the tired eyes. I was a woman of substance, a woman whose name carried weight in the industry. I could have let him suffer. I could have let Morgana and Tristan figure it out. But I chose a different path. I called the hospital's financial office and authorized a full, anonymous payment for his transplant and recovery. I did it because I wanted to prove to myself that they no longer had any power over me. By paying the bill, I was officially buying my freedom. I was settling the last account. I wasn't a daughter paying for her father. I was a benefactor closing a file on a bad investment. The letter I sent with the final invoice was my quiet exit made permanent. I didn't use an angry tone. I didn't use expletives. I used the same cold, analytical language they had used to dismiss my depression. I wanted them to feel the chill of the void I had left behind. When the letter arrived, it reportedly caused a massive rift. Morgana was furious that I was flaunting my wealth, while Tristan was humiliated that the sister he looked down on was now his only hope for survival. My parents were forced to reckon with the fact that the child they had treated as a ghost was the only one with a soul. Their guilt turned into a poison that eventually made them stop speaking to each other altogether. The perfect Hayes family had finally fractured under the weight of the truth. I am now at a point in my life where I don't look back. I've built a family of my own, not of blood, but of choice. I have friends who celebrate my wins, and a partner who asks how I'm doing before I even have to say a word. I realized that my parents were right about one thing. I was resilient. But they were wrong about why. I wasn't resilient so I could serve them. I was resilient so I could survive them. I've turned the middle child curse into a blessing. I am the bridge that I finally crossed to get to the other side. The moral of my story for every girl watching this is simple. Sacrifice is a noble thing. But a sacrifice that requires you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm is not love. It's abuse. Do not let your family use your strength as a reason to ignore your pain. If they tell you to just adjust while they take everything from you, it's time to adjust your distance. You are not a secondary character in your family's play. You are the protagonist of your own life. Sometimes, the most family-oriented thing you can do is leave a toxic family so you can finally learn how to love yourself. The Hayes family still lives in that old house, but it's a hollow shell now. They have the money I gave them, but they don't have the peace. They have the life they chose, but they don't have the girl who made it livable. I, on the other hand, have everything. I have my career, my health, and a silence that is no longer lonely. I am no longer the forgotten daughter. I am the woman who remembered herself when everyone else chose to forget. And now, I want to ask you, have you ever felt like you were the only one holding your family together while they tore you apart? If you left tomorrow, would they miss you, or would they just miss the things you do for them? Is your loyalty to your blood stronger than your loyalty to your own soul? Don't wait for them to see you. Start seeing yourself and walk out of the shadow and into the sun.